The first thing I remember isn't the music, or the champagne, or the chandelier light bouncing off crystal. It's the smile. The kind that looks polite from a distance, but up close feels like a knife tucked behind lipstick. She gave me that smile the second I walked into the reception, like she'd been waiting all night for me to show up so the show could finally start. The ballroom was pure wealth on display, white roses stacked like clouds, a string quartet in the corner, servers gliding past with trays like they were floating. Every table near the dance floor had name cards printed in gold, and every table near the walls had, people like me. I found my seat without help because nobody offered it. Modest, elegant, quiet. The kind of outfit you wear when you're trying not to be a problem in someone else's picture. I sat where they placed me, far enough from the head table that I could barely hear the couple laugh, close enough to see the bride's mother scan the room like a queen counting subjects. When her eyes landed on me, she didn't look surprised. She looked satisfied, like my presence confirmed something she'd already decided about me. People around me kept turning their heads in small, curious checks, like I was the only detail in the room that didn't match the theme. I heard my name once, soft and stretched out, then a quick giggle. A phone lifted, not subtle even for a second. I kept my posture straight anyway, hands folded, face calm, like dignity was the only dress code I could control. Then the DJ lowered the music and the wedding planner tapped the mic. A quick announcement. A soft laugh. The room leaned in the way rooms do when they smell entertainment. The bride's mother stood, took the microphone like it belonged to her, and when she looked at the couple, her expression turned sweet enough to fool strangers. She started with compliments, the usual performance about love and family and blessings. People clapped at the right moments. Glasses lifted. Cameras came out. Then she paused, tilted her head toward my side of the room, and let that smile return, slow and deliberate, like she was turning a page. "And of course," she said, voice warm and loud, "we want to thank everyone who helped make tonight possible. Even the ones who didn't think they'd ever get a seat in a room like this." A few laughs popped off immediately, light and obedient. She kept her eyes on me. "Some people just have a talent," she continued, "for showing up when it benefits them. You know the type. Always struggling, always needing something, always reminding you how hard their life has been." The laughter grew, not everyone but enough. Enough to make it feel normal. I didn't move. I didn't blink fast. I didn't give her the reaction she was trying to pull out of me like a prize. She took a sip of champagne with the mic still in her hand. "But tonight is about new beginnings," she said, pretending kindness now. "So let's all be gracious. Let's all be welcoming, even to unexpected guests." That's when the cameras really found me. I saw it in the way shoulders angled, the way screens lifted higher, the way someone whispered, "There she is." The bride's mother didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She was doing it clean in front of everyone with a smile that said she could get away with it. I glanced toward the head table. The groom stared at his glass like it had answers at the bottom. The bride's lips tightened for a second, then she forced a laugh and looked away. No one stood up for me. No one corrected her. Not even the people who knew the truth. The bride's mother ended her little moment with a toast, sweet words wrapped around poison, and the room clapped because that's what rooms do when someone powerful tells them when to clap. Music came back. Conversations restarted. The party pretended nothing happened. I stayed seated long enough to let the heat pass from my face, long enough to make sure my hands didn't shake, long enough to show her she didn't get to drag me into her mess on her schedule. Then I stood, smoothed my outfit like I was simply heading to the restroom, and walked out of the ballroom without rushing. The hallway outside was quieter, lined with warm sconces and soft carpet that swallowed sound. I could still hear the bass from inside, the laughter, the glasses clinking, life continuing without me. I exhaled once, steady. Then I took out my phone, scrolled to a number I'd saved weeks ago, and pressed call. When they answered, I didn't waste words. "It's time," I said. And then I hung up. I stayed in that hallway long enough to feel my pulse return to normal, long enough to let the humiliation stop trying to climb up my throat. Inside the ballroom, the party kept moving like nothing happened, like I was just a punchline they could toss aside once it landed. I slipped my phone back into my clutch, fixed my expression in the mirror-like shine of a framed picture on the wall, and walked back in with the same calm face they'd laughed at. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. I'd barely reached my table when the energy shifted, subtle at first, like a draft moving through expensive fabric. A waiter leaned toward the head table, spoke quietly, then leaned again, this time to the wedding planner. The planner's smile held, but her eyes sharpened. Another staff member appeared with a small black folder, the kind venues use when they need to talk money without saying the word out loud. The bride's mother noticed it, of course. She always noticed everything. Her chin lifted, her gaze snapped to whoever was approaching, and for the first time all night, her control looked rehearsed instead of natural. The manager arrived at the head table with that practiced, polite posture that says sorry without shaping the syllables. He bent slightly, spoke softly, and the bride's mother's face twitched like she'd been slapped with air. She laughed once, a quick sound that didn't match her eyes, then said something back with a sharp smile, like she could charm reality into behaving. The manager didn't move. He just waited, still polite, still firm. The groom reached into his pocket and pulled out his card again. Then another, then another. Each time, the manager's expression stayed neutral, but the silence around the head table started to spread. People nearby stopped chewing. Someone lowered their phone, then lifted it again, because this was better than a speech. The bride's mother's laughter got thinner, and the bride's smile began to crack at the corners, the way makeup does under heat. The groom stood up, half a step too fast, and leaned over the table as if he could fix it by being closer to the problem. The manager quietly angled the folder toward him, just enough for him to see. The groom's shoulders dropped. He said something under his breath that looked like an apology and a prayer at the same time. The bride's mother turned her head slowly, scanning the room like she was searching for an exit that wouldn't be seen as one. That's when her eyes landed on me again. For a second, the old look returned, that same confident cruelty like she could still make me the story instead of her. Then the panic underneath it surfaced, because she wasn't looking at me to mock me anymore. She was looking at me like a lifeline she didn't deserve. She didn't call my name at first. She didn't have to. She just stared, and in that stare was a message. Fix this. Make this disappear. Save us from the embarrassment. Save my daughter from watching her perfect night collapse. I didn't move. The manager waited, the way professionals do when they've seen money run out before. The groom tried the last card, the one he'd been holding like a final hope. The manager nodded once, almost sympathetic, and closed the folder. The bride's mother's smile finally fell off her face. Voices started to rise, whispers turning into questions people could no longer swallow. Someone at a nearby table laughed, not kindly. Another person lifted their phone higher. The bride stared at the groom like she'd just met him. The groom stared at the table like it might open up and take him. Then the bride's mother stepped away from the head table and walked straight toward me, fast but trying to look graceful, like urgency could be disguised if your heels cost enough. She stopped at my table, leaned in close, and lowered her voice into something that was meant to sound private but felt like a demand. "Do you have a card?" she asked. I held her gaze for a beat, letting her hear the silence she'd tried to bury me under. Then I stood, not rushed, not shaky, and picked up my clutch like this was always how the night was going to go. "You just made a joke about me needing something," I said calmly, "so let's not pretend this is awkward." Her mouth tightened. "This isn't the time." "I agree," I said, quiet enough to sting. "You should have thought about timing before you grabbed a microphone." I walked past her without waiting for permission, crossed the ballroom with every eye following me now for a different reason, and stopped at the head table where the manager was still standing. The groom looked at me like he was hoping I was a miracle and terrified I was a witness. "I'll take care of it," I told the manager. The bride's mother inhaled like she wanted to interrupt, but the room was watching, and even she knew she couldn't shout over a moment like this. The manager handed the folder to me with both hands, respectful now, and I opened it slowly, like I had all the time in the world. The number was painful on purpose, a luxury venue's way of charging you for your pride. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a card. Not flashy, not loud, just clean, dark, and unmistakably expensive. The groom's eyes widened. The bride's mother froze. The bride blinked like her brain needed a second to catch up. I handed the card to the manager, and he nodded once, then stepped away to pee. "Process it." The silence in the room stretched tight, the kind that turns into gossip the second it snaps. While we waited, the bride's mother leaned in again, voice suddenly softer, sweeter, edited. "I didn't know," she said. I glanced at her. "You didn't care." The manager returned, and his tone had changed. Same professionalism, but now there was respect threaded through it. "Approved," he said, and offered the folder back like it was an apology. A few people around us exhaled like they'd been holding their breath for fun. The bride's mother forced a smile back onto her face, but it looked painted on, not worn. The groom swallowed hard. The bride stared at me like I'd just stepped out of a story she didn't understand. Then someone said what was already forming in everyone's mind. "What do you do?" the bride's mother asked, too sharp to sound curious. I didn't answer her right away. I turned to the bride instead, because she was the only one at that table who still looked shocked for the right reasons. "Congratulations," I said simply, and it landed like a warning wrapped in politeness. Behind us, the music started again, but it sounded different now, like the party was trying to pretend it hadn't just shown its real face. The bride's mother was shaking with a kind of anger she couldn't release without exposing herself. The groom looked like he might be sick. And I stayed calm, because calm is what you wear when you know the truth and everyone else is still guessing. The bride's mother leaned close one last time, her voice low and bitter. "You're going to embarrass us even more, aren't you?" I met her eyes and kept my expression steady. "You already did that," I said. "I just stopped protecting you." And in that moment, the bride's mother realized the same thing the room was realizing. I wasn't the invisible guest anymore. I was the problem they couldn't laugh off. I didn't even make it back to my seat before the groom's temper snapped. He came after me with that forced confidence walkmen use when they're trying to look in control while everything inside them is collapsing. He kept his voice low at first, like he was doing me a favor, like I was the one causing a scene. But his eyes were wild, and his jaw kept ticking. He called me dramatic, called me attention-hungry, acted like I had humiliated him on purpose, as if his cards declining in front of a room full of people was somehow my fault. The bride stood frozen a few steps behind him, watching like she didn't know which version of her new husband she'd married. The bride's mother slid in beside him fast, trying to steer the story back into her hands. She smiled too wide and said it was all a misunderstanding, that the payment system must have glitched, that people should go back to dancing. But her voice was thin, and she kept looking at me like she was trying to calculate what I knew. The groom didn't want calm. Calm wasn't going to save his pride. He leaned closer and asked me, almost spitting the words, what I really wanted. That's when I realized he still thought this was about money. He still thought I was the same woman they could ignore, then use, then push back into the shadows once the emergency was over. I told him I didn't want anything from him, then I let the silence sit long enough to make him nervous. His eyes flicked toward the bride, then back to me like he was checking who was listening. And in that small hesitation, I saw it, the guilt behind the anger, the fear behind the performance. I lowered my voice and said the one thing that made his face change completely. I said I knew where the missing money went, not the wedding money, the other money, the quiet transfers, the cash withdrawals. The business expenses that didn't match any business. His throat tightened and his mouth opened like he wanted to deny it, but nothing came out clean. The bride's mother jumped in, sharp and quick, telling him to stop talking to me, telling me to leave, telling me I was trying to ruin her daughter's night out of jealousy. Jealousy. That word was always their favorite because it kept them from having to say the real one out loud. Fear. The bride finally found her voice and asked what I meant, asked what other money I was talking about, asked why her husband looked like he'd seen a ghost. The groom tried to laugh it off, but his laugh broke halfway through. It sounded like a man drowning. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I told the bride that her mother had been lying to her for a long time, and her husband had been helping. The bride's mother's smile disappeared so fast it was like someone had wiped it off. She told me to watch my mouth. She told me she didn't know who I thought I was, and that was the moment I stopped speaking to her like she was in control. I said her mother didn't hate me because I was beneath them. She hated me because she knew I could prove what she'd been hiding. The bride blinked, confused, then horrified as her. Eyes moved between us. The groom stepped forward like he wanted to stop me physically, but he didn't touch me. He couldn't. Not with everyone's attention hovering near us, not with cameras already lifted, not with his image already cracking. I said the words slowly and I watched them land. I said his late nights weren't work. I said those hotel receipts weren't business meetings. I said the reason her mother kept pushing me out wasn't class or status, it was because I was too close to the truth. The bride's mother's hands clenched at her sides, and for the first time she looked truly scared, not annoyed, not offended, scared. The groom whispered my name like it was a threat. The bride whispered no like it was a prayer. Then I gave the bride the part that mattered. I told her the secret wasn't just that her husband had been cheating, it was who he'd been cheating with. Her face drained of color, and even before she asked, her eyes found her mother's. The bride's mother shook her head once fast, like she could shake reality away. The groom tried to speak, but his words tangled. And the bride's voice came out small, almost childlike, when she finally asked the question she didn't want answered. Her mother didn't answer. Her husband didn't answer either. Because both of them knew the silence was louder than any confession. And then, from the edge of the crowd, a man stepped closer, calm and steady, holding a thin folder like it weighed nothing at all. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look confused. He looked prepared. He looked like someone who had been waiting for the exact second when the truth would have an audience. He met my eyes briefly, just long enough for me to know the call I made in the hallway had reached the right person. He spoke like he belonged in the room, and suddenly everyone moved without realizing they were making space for him. The bride's mother recognized him instantly, and her lips parted like she'd forgotten how to breathe. That's when he said her name, not as a greeting, but as a warning. And the groom took one step back, because he finally understood this wasn't a private family fight anymore. This was about to become public. The man with the folder didn't rush. He moved like someone who'd learned a long time ago that power never needs to run. He stopped where everyone could see him, close enough to the head table that the cameras caught his face, and he didn't even glance at the groom first. His eyes went straight to the bride's mother, steady and unimpressed, the way you look at someone who's been getting away with things for too long. The room was already quiet, but somehow it got quieter, like even the chandeliers were holding their breath. He opened the folder and slid out a set of documents with clean, sharp edges. Not printouts, not screenshots. Real copies, the kind people keep in safe deposit boxes and pretend don't exist until disaster forces them into daylight. He said calmly that he hadn't come to make a scene. He'd come to stop one. Then he placed the papers down where the bride's mother could see them, and he said a few words that changed the temperature of the whole wedding. There was a will, there was a trust, and there had been theft. The bride's mother tried to laugh, tried to turn it into a misunderstanding, but the sound died on her tongue. Her hands hovered like she wanted to snatch the documents and rip them up, but she didn't, because she knew the moment she touched them she'd look guilty. The groom's face tightened like he was bracing for impact, and the bride stood frozen, eyes flicking from her mother to the papers to her husband, as if the floor under her feet had quietly become unreliable. The man explained it in simple terms that nobody could twist. A trust fund, set up years ago, intended for education and a stable start, split equally between the rightful beneficiaries. The numbers were clear, and the timeline was worse than the numbers because it told the story of a long betrayal, not a single mistake. The bride's mother's composure started to crack at the edges, and for the first time that night, she looked less like a queen and more like a woman who'd built her life on a lie and just heard the first brick fall. I watched the bride's face as understanding arrived in pieces. First disbelief, then shock, then the slow horror of realizing this wasn't gossip or jealousy or drama. This was paper. This was signatures. This was money with a trail. She turned toward her husband like she wanted him to deny it, to explain it away, to save her from the truth. But he couldn't look at her. He kept staring at the documents like he was watching his own life sentence being typed out. The bride's mother tried to step forward and speak, but the man cut her off without raising his voice. He said the documents had already been verified. He said copies had already been filed. He said the reason he was here tonight, at this wedding, was because someone had finally decided the truth didn't deserve to stay hidden just to keep the peace. The bride swallowed hard, and her hand moved toward her chest like she was trying to physically hold herself together. That was when the groom snapped, not with strength but with panic. He tried to blame me, tried to claim I was doing this out of spite, tried to paint me as bitter and unstable. It was a last, desperate swing at control, but it fell flat because nobody was watching him anymore. The attention had shifted. People weren't laughing now. They were calculating. They were checking each other's faces. They were deciding who they believed, and for the first time, the bride's mother wasn't automatically winning. I didn't argue with him. I didn't need to. I just reached into my clutch, pulled out my phone, and turned on speaker. My thumb hovered for 1 second, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted everyone to understand this was the line between the old me and the new one. Then I made the call. When my lawyer answered, the room heard it. Every syllable, every professional tone, every calm confirmation. I spelled out what I wanted in plain language, the kind that doesn't leave loopholes. I authorized the filing. I authorized recovery of the full amount. I authorized interest. I authorized everything they thought I'd never do because they thought I needed them more than they needed me. The bride's mother's face went tight with fury, and then without warning she reached for the oldest weapon in her drawer, the one she used when charm failed. She tried to exile me with one sentence, like she could erase me from the room the way she'd erased me from the story. She said I'd be cut off, disowned, removed from the family, as if those words still had the power to scare me. I looked at her and kept my voice calm because calm was the most brutal thing I could give her in that moment. I told her she couldn't take what I never truly had. The groom made a sound like he wanted to object, but his throat betrayed him. The bride stared at her mother as if meeting her for the first time, and tears slipped down her cheeks without drama, just the quiet grief of a woman realizing the people closest to her were capable of anything. Then the man with the folder leaned in slightly and said the final detail, the one that made the bride's mother's knees almost buckle. He said the trust wasn't the only thing that had been touched. There were other papers, other signatures, other transactions, and if they wanted to keep pretending this was a family argument, they could, or they could accept what it really was. Fraud. The groom finally turned toward me, eyes wide, and in that look I saw the exact moment he understood the truth. This wasn't a speech anymore. This was a case. And as the first guests began stepping back, whispering into phones, sending messages, recording video, the bride's mother stood there in the middle of her perfect night, realizing she hadn't just lost control of the wedding. She'd lost control of the story. I didn't wait for another insult. I didn't wait for another lie. I just turned and walked, steady and quiet, like the whole ballroom was finally background noise. Behind me, the wedding didn't end with a dance or a toast. It ended with people standing up in slow motion, phones in their hands, expressions shifting from amusement to disgust, because nothing scares a crowd like proof that can't be joked away. The bride stayed where she was, shaking, not chasing anyone, not performing, just staring at the ruins of the life she'd been pushed into. Her mother tried to follow, but she froze when she realized the room wasn't with her anymore. Out in the hallway, the air felt colder and cleaner. The muffled music sounded fake now, like a soundtrack added too late. I kept walking toward the exit signs, past the gold-framed mirrors and the flower arrangements that suddenly looked like props, until I reached the quiet corner near the service doors. That's where I finally exhaled, not because I was breaking, but because I was done carrying what was never mine to carry. The man with the folder caught up to me and didn't say much. He didn't need to. He just gave me a small nod that said, "It's in motion now," and I walked out like someone who'd finally been released. The fallout hit fast, exactly the way chaos always does when it's been building for years, and someone finally opens the door. By the next morning, the annulment paperwork was already being prepared, not because anyone was being dramatic, but because the evidence changed everything, and the family with real assets knew how to protect what mattered. The trust was frozen before anyone could touch it again, and lawyers started moving through the mess like cleanup crews after a storm. The bride was pulled into safety by the one person in her family who still had a spine, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't being told what to feel. She was being told the truth. The groom tried to disappear, but the internet doesn't let people vanish when it smells a scandal. Clips from the reception leaked, not the full story, just enough to destroy the mask. People who used to clap for him stopped answering calls. People who loved taking photos with him started deleting them. The venue staff, the vendors, the guests, everyone suddenly remembered details they'd ignored before, and when enough people remember at the same time, a narrative becomes a verdict. He wasn't the charming groom anymore. He was the man who gambled with a woman's life and thought nobody would notice. Her mother fought like she always did, teeth first. She denied, deflected, accused, threatened. but threats don't work when documents have already been filed and the people you used to intimidate are now protecting themselves. She tried to spin it as jealousy and sabotage, but jealousy doesn't come with verified signatures, bank trails, hotel logs, and recorded conversations. She tried to claim she was being set up, but the more she spoke, the more tired everyone looked. Because the truth has a strange effect on liars. It makes them loud, and it makes them sloppy. Weeks turned into months, and the pretty life they built started collapsing in the least glamorous ways. Accounts locked, properties audited, transfers reversed, quiet meetings with attorneys where nobody smiled. The groom's name became the kind people avoid in public, and the bride's mother became the kind of woman friends stop inviting because she brings a shadow with her. The father, the one who sat half asleep through everything, finally woke up to a reality he couldn't drink away. The bank doesn't care about excuses. Debt doesn't care about pride. And a reputation can't pay a bill. As for me, I didn't celebrate. I didn't post. I didn't take victory selfies. I went back to my life, not because what happened wasn't big, but because my peace mattered more than their downfall. I opened my shop in the morning, made my coffee the same way, and kept my hands busy the way I always had. The difference was I wasn't swallowing anything anymore. I wasn't making myself smaller to keep other people comfortable. I wasn't begging for a place at a table that had never been set for me. Not long after, a letter came through my door. No return address, no drama, just a clean envelope with my name in careful handwriting. Inside was a short note from the bride. She didn't try to make it poetic. She didn't try to turn it into a speech. She thanked me for stopping it before it got worse, and she apologized for the parts she'd been blind to. It wasn't forgiveness or friendship. It was something rarer. Accountability. And on the day the final legal signatures were completed, I stood in my shop with sunlight on the floor, listening to the quiet hum of my machine, and I realized something simple. They wanted me humiliated. They wanted me silent. They wanted me gone. And in the end, I was the one who walked out with my dignity intact, while their perfect world fell apart under the weight of its own lies. Sometimes revenge isn't shouting. Sometimes it's one calm step toward the exit, knowing the truth is already chasing them down.